to The Insomniac Show with Nicolette and Brian. We'll get real deep with you, educating, inspiring, and solving problems with some of the most inspirational humans on the planet. Buckle up and come on the journey.
I'm excited. All right, guys. I'm Nicolette, and today Brian and I are here with Cori Wamsley. She is the CEO of Aurora Corialis Publishing with many years experience writing and editing, and now she's gotten into publishing. So she is here to chat with us today about hopefully the entire process and how much fun that is. So thank you so much for joining us today, Cori. We really appreciate your time.
Well, thank you for having me.
Okay, so first question, Aurora Corialis.
Brian, you never asked the first question.
I don't, but I was very curious. It was like one of those things where I was like, when I saw it, it was like Aurora Borealis. Wait a second, there's no Corialis. What is Corialis? So where did that come from? I'm very curious.
It was several weeks of me going, there's got to be something fun and interesting that I can put out there as a publishing name. And I love lights and the colors of the Aurora. And I was watching a show and I saw an ad come on and the character's name was Aurora. And I was like, I wonder what I can do with that. So I started Googling, of course, lots of Auroras, publishing and other things. And I, for some reason, thought about how can I put my name into it? And of course, Aurora Borealis, and just, I took the bore out.
Well, there you go, Brian.
Yeah, I was
happy now.
I'm very happy. I'm very happy.
All right. Well, let's back up
questions.
Before we got to the publishing company. And why don't you kick us off and tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey to your now publishing company?
Okay. So I have been a professional writer my entire adult life. I worked 10 years with the Department of Justice, the Department of Energy. After that, I got a few novels written while I was doing that kind of on the side and, learning about the writing process, the publishing process, and just really enjoying that in my spare time. When I decided to start my own business, I started working with business owners, and a lot of them, of course, wanted help writing stuff for their website or a press release or like little things. So I thought I would be doing a lot of the same stuff that I was doing in the Department of Energy, just these small projects. But every time someone heard that I was an author, they're like, okay, stop that. Tell me how you write a book, because I keep hearing about business owners writing books. So I would give them a little bit of information, and people just wanted to know more. It's something that not a lot of people do. So they really didn't know anyone else who was an author. And then, of course, as I met more and more business owners, that's when I started realizing, a lot of the people who are leaders in their niche, they have a book. People who are even nonprofit owners, like Leigh Clark, who we connected through. People like that have a book for their nonprofit. So I really honed down on how can I help these authors, because this is something they want to be a quick process. They don't want to have to do the whole thing themselves. So I found myself jumping in and saying, all right, well, do this, do that. I know somebody who does a book cover, my phenomenal cover designer. Let's do that. I'll edit the book. And I found that I was taking on so much of that process that I really just wanted to make it easier for them.
Right.
So that's when I kind of changed from just coaching and editing to a publishing company this past spring. I'd already brought on more editors to help me, and I was building my team. So I just wanted to, make it official and create something that could really help my, my clients get their books out there, get their message out to the world, and not have to learn something completely different on the side on top of everything they're doing.
So out of all of the components, right? So you've got like writing, editing, publishing, marketing. Which do you find people are struggle with the most?
Most people, when they come to me, I'm like, hey, what kind of support are you looking for? And almost always they say, I have no idea what I'm doing.
Like where to start, right?
Yeah, they don't know any of it. They don't
forget all the lists, the list I had. Just give it all to me.
Yeah, basically, because they know they can write, they can communicate, they know they have a good story, but a lot of times they aren't sure how to get it out there in a way that's going to connect with their audience. So I help them build the book that reaches that audience and brings them back for more, especially if they're coaches and speakers, because they want to use it as a marketing tool in their business. And then, of course, I know all the rest of the pieces to do the publishing. So, something they don't have to worry about at all. Just here's my book, have fun with it.
So you put out a lot of content on your website and on LinkedIn, and you're really educating the audience all the time. So one of my questions is, in your experience, what do you find are some of the challenges that I know, okay, I don't know what I'm doing at all, right? So that there's a challenge. But when you get into the process, what are the common mistakes people are making when they're in the process?
One thing I see when they're writing is anything that's kind of troubling them still. Some people have been through traumatic events that they want to write about because they want to help others get through it easier. Sometimes they are rushed through that writing. So it's almost like they don't want to write that part. Right. And I can always tell that when I'm reading, because as a coach, I'm reading through what they're writing. So I go through it and I can find those pieces that like the writing is very staccato, or it just seems like they didn't want to share it. And I wouldn't call that a mistake. That's just a common reaction. People don't want to delve into some of the darker stuff. So, when I run into stuff like that, that's something that we sit down and work on. Hey, what do we need to share most? What is it you wish you had heard when you were going through this? How can we pull that out? So, that's one common thing I see. Something else I see a lot of is people just sharing the story, almost like you're watching a movie and you're just explaining what's going on the surface. And you really want to dig deep into emotions, dig into, your reactions, I had a lump in my throat, my hands were sweaty. I was so excited, I was just shaking. Whatever it is, you need to give those kind of reactions and let people kind of get in your head when you're writing, because that's the pieces that help connect with the audience.
Isn't that one of the most common mistakes where people are just telling the story like it's a movie? Like they're just going boom, boom, boom. Yeah. And then that's like probably one of the biggest common mistakes in writing. Now you also mentioned them not wanting to dig deep, right? Do you think it's sometimes they just don't know how to pull that out, like in a way where it's going to make sense for someone else, because it is emotional, right? So it is hard to translate that into written words.
Yeah, it can be really hard, especially if they aren't used to talking about that. A lot of people, like their first experience sharing this story is writing their book, and they're throwing back the curtain and saying, "Hey, here's all the dark, dirty stuff, and you get to see it." So it can be really difficult.
Now, you also mentioned, okay, I don't know where to start. And you talk a lot about this. This is something, and I'm in a lot of writers groups on Facebook, and everybody's like, it's not writer's block per se. It's almost like I have so much going on. So how do you organize that? And I'm sure that's something that you help with as well. But are there any, is there anything you tell clients, like, before you even get there, like before you even get to that part, is there something you can do before you even start to overwhelm yourself with that?
Yeah, you should always think about who you're writing for. So sometimes you just sit down and you're like, oh, I have this book in my head and I just want to write it. But, if it doesn't work with your business or your nonprofit or, whatever big goals you have, if you want to be a speaker and you want to start talking about, your journey through cancer, for example. I've worked with a couple of people who did that, but your business is marketing. Then maybe you need to look at, okay, am I starting a new business? Am I trying to transition into that? Or am I doing two things at once? Or is there a way that I can connect this with my current business? Now, a cancer journey in marketing is going to be tough, but I've seen people connect their real lives with their businesses and show how that impacts what's going on in their business. And it works really well. So just think about who you want to reach, what impact you want to have on them. And some of those big goals that can really clear out some of the clutter and help you eliminate stuff that just isn't going to work for that.
Right. We talk about this a lot with people. It's about intent from the onset, right? What is the intent? And a lot of people miss that simple fact that intent drives so many things. So what is the intent of the book? Is it to get people to change? Is it to whatever it is? you know, and that's really how you're driving what you're writing or how you're telling that story in many ways.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to think about what your big goal is.
And a lot of times, Brian, even, people just write about what they want to write about, right?
Oh, yeah, we see
even
that
other industries, I just like
Right.
what I'm writing about, so I want to write about it.
Or it's disconnected, right? I mean, think about how many things you've read where it's like you're here and you're in this story, and then they're like, oh, let me just shift what I'm doing into this. Like, to your point of cancer and marketing, right? Like, it's hard to make, a hard right turn. If you're talking about your cancer story and then you're going, oh, well, my marketing career, it doesn't work for the user.
Right.
There's that disconnect in the pieces, and sometimes, it drives me crazy when sometimes you read books and they're like, what is this book supposed to be about? Like this or that? Do you know what I mean? Like, is this type of book or that type of book? Yeah. So you do see that a lot,
Yeah, and it can be tough as a writer to get in your reader's head, which is part of the value of working with a coach, is having somebody who can pull back and say, all right, well, I'm a new reader. I'm not in your head, but this is what I'm seeing. And this is confusing, or here you're jumping around, or do you mean this or do you mean this? Because I've read stuff before too, where they're like, it sounds like they're hinting at an affair, for example, and really it wasn't that at all. I read a book this spring that was like that, and I had to say, hey, you might want to reword that a little bit.
So on average, how many edits or rounds of writing the book? I'm not even talking about like copy editing, like rounds of writing a book do most authors go through? Would you guess? I know that's a tough question.
Most authors, I would say they go through several. Usually when I'm working with somebody, you have such a good idea of what you want to write before you write it that it's a lot faster. So we go through usually, I would say, let's say 2 rounds. So if my client is working on their book, they pass it to me. I give them some feedback on it and they go back and rework it. Once they get to the end of the book, that's when we pass it to the editor, and my editors do 2 rounds of editing just to make sure everything is clean. Yeah. So, we don't introduce error on that first round.
All right. That was a good question, Brian. I like that one. That was a good one.
You have any random questions?
Good one.
I know my audience. I know the intent, people. I know the intent.
Yeah. All right, Cori, what is your favorite part of the process personally?
Oh, I like the very beginning and the very end. And here's why. So the very beginning, when I sit down with an author and I know they're excited, they got all that excitement in them. It's just pouring out through their words. They are, bubbling over with all these ideas. And, that's why they don't know what to do. And then I'm kind of grabbing them out of the air going, okay, let's do this, let's do that, let's put it all together. Here's your outline. This is what we have. And it's just so nice when we get off that first call and they're like, oh, okay, now I know what I'm going to do. And then they roll with it. And then at the very end, again, you get that excitement, here it comes. And then you got that book in your hand, and everybody's, of course, the visual part of writing a book is getting that cover out there. So you start seeing everybody on social media reacting to the cover, and I'm kind of the fly on the wall that's like watching their posts, like, oh, everybody's excited. Oh, look, their family's commenting. It really excites me.
Like, my mom loves my book.
My mom loves my book. Listen, my mom is Islamic Cat's biggest fan.
She is.
Yeah, it's just, that excitement at the end to see like, yeah, they had no idea at the beginning, and here we are at the end, they finally did it. And it didn't take years.
Right. So how long, what is your typical, and I'm thinking back to when we spoke with Leigh, and I do want to touch on the book as well in a couple of minutes, but what was that turnaround time like for you from beginning to end? And is that typical?
Yeah. So Leigh did an anthology. So that's a bunch of authors getting together, writing a book together. We've done a couple anthologies this year, and the short end of it, I think we did 4 or 5 months to get that pulled together and out and launched. Leigh's, I think she approached me with the idea last November, and then we just launched in June. So again, pretty quick. My programs run 6 months, and I've toyed with that over the years. Like, how fast can you really write a book? And I've written a book in 6 weeks, but I don't recommend that to people. So it seems like 6 months is kind of the sweet spot to get the whole thing written, get through editing, cover, some marketing, all that good stuff.
So you talked about an outline, right? So, certain types of book, you could sort of create the outline. Like my last book, I could totally create an outline. I knew where it was going, start to finish. But then also you have fiction novels, right? You can't really create an outline for fiction. I mean, I guess you can, but it's more of where your mind's going to start taking you to some degree, when you're creating that. So how do you structure if you're not writing sort of like, a traditional book that's outlined, like here's a story or here's an anthology or I'm a business. How do you structure that in terms of an outline, if you're writing fiction?
Yeah, fiction's a totally different animal. I don't work with a lot of fiction authors because it's a lot less streamlined. And just from my own experience, I would write an outline for the book, get halfway through the book and go, oh, I should put this in too. And then go back and adjust my outline, figure out like, oh, I should have put foreshadowing in here, things like that. So it's a little bit different trying to do an outline for that.
Yeah. Now, I have a business question for you. You as a business and in your transition to a publishing company, I'm just curious because I really don't know the answer to this. What was that like to take your business itself to that next level? So, what requirements were in there? Like, what makes you a publishing company now? Is my question.
Yeah. Well, when I first started thinking about it, it was basically me looking at what my structure was and saying, what else do I need to add in? And it honestly wasn't a whole lot. So what makes me a publishing company now is that I handle the publishing piece. We're doing some marketing around that. My authors get, with a hybrid model like what we have, my authors get 60% of their royalties. With hybrids, you're required to give at least 50% of the royalties to the authors or of the income, and that becomes their royalties. So there are certain requirements for hybrids. It's a different model from self-publishing. It's a different model from traditional publishing, which I think most people are used to those two. Self-publishing, the author handles publishing the book themselves, so they can find a platform online and do that. With traditional, they're pitching to an agent and the agent pitches to a publishing house. The hybrid is kind of the sweet spot in between where you have more control like you do over self-publishing, but then you have, the publisher actually handling the process. You actually have, like with mine, we have a set of professionals that they work with. So they don't have to go out and find an editor and find somebody to handle formatting and
Gotcha.
with all of the different pieces. So it's, basically the sweet spot in the middle. I've seen people who, they want to have more control over the process when they're a business owner. They're just used to that. They have their own brand, they have their brand colors, they have their own feel for everything. So they want to combine that a lot of times. And with a traditional house, they don't necessarily go for that. Like with, if somebody comes to me with a book idea and they're like, this is the title, I want this title. I'm not going to say, absolutely not, we pick the title. I might say, let's look at some other books. Let's see what's out there in this genre, because we want to make sure it fits in, but it stands out. I've seen some titles that I know are just not going to speak to the audience. And I always like it to marinate a little bit. Same with the cover. We want the cover to fit in, but stand out. It's not going to be a stock photo that you pulled off of a free website and it's just slapped on there with some boring font. It's something that speaks to your brand. It's something that is unique too. So there are a lot of pieces that we do that a self-published author wouldn't necessarily do unless they meet the right people along their journey.
Gotcha. Okay. Now, most recently, right, and how we met through Leigh, you have been working on that book with Leigh, and you also had a chapter in that book. So that's super cool. How did that happen? And tell us a little bit about your chapter.
Sure. So Leigh approached me last fall and she said, hey, I know we've been working on this other book. I think I want to do this instead. Basically, it's Living Kindly, and it ended up being a collaboration of don't remember if it's 13 or 14 authors, who all came together and presented a chapter talking about kindness. And when she first said that, I was like, okay, well, how many times can we talk about letting people off traffic or sharing a cookie with a friend? Like, what are we doing here? And it ended up being these beautiful conversations of how kindness has impacted people's lives, and these like deep philosophical thoughts on kindness and where we are as humanity and how we can bring it into our communities, our office buildings, our families. So as I was watching this unfold, I was like, okay, this is a wonderful book. And it ended up being the first book we launched through Aurora Corialis. So I'm very happy about that.
Nice.
But as we were watching this, one of the authors had to drop out, and it was almost launch time. And Leigh was like, hey, not sure if you're interested, but we would love to have your perspective. So if you want to share a chapter, you can. You'd have to have it to me in 2 days.
Well, she knew you wrote that whole book in 6 weeks. So,
Don't tell people that.
Yeah, so I kind of took it as a challenge. But yeah, just knowing my process and knowing how I operate, I basically just found a couple hours on a Saturday, sat down at my desk and started thinking about it. What is it that kindness means to me? And I couldn't come up with anything. So one of the things I tell my authors is, if you're having trouble with any of it, talk to somebody. I don't care who it is, just have a conversation. It can be a colleague, it can be a friend, it can be your husband, whatever. Who was home? My kids. So I went out and was like, hey, you're 6 and 8. Tell me, what does kindness mean to you? And they gave me these sweet little definitions. Oh, it's sharing and caring. It's, being nice and kind. I'm like, okay. All right, well, I don't feel like that's it. And that was where I did my jumping off point, was seeing what their perspective is as children and kind of thinking back to when I was a child and, how did I see it and what surrounded kindness for me? How did it morph over the years? And as I was looking at that in my own life, I realized, as a child, there were, those kids who were like nice to me so they could team up with me on a group project. Right. Because they knew I was getting good grades and they wanted that too. And as a child, I wasn't realizing that. I was like, oh, they don't want to play with me at recess, but they want to work with me on this project. And just figuring out, like, sometimes kindness is not really kindness. It's something we think it is, especially as a child. It can be kind of confusing and overwhelming. And, it has all these emotions. And it, as I got older, I learned not to always trust it. So just thinking about how that worked in my life, clear up until the present time, and even within my own household, how am I teaching my children to be kind? Right. And a lot of times I'll hear them picking at each other and I'll just yell across the house, are you guys being kind? And it's just things like that. Like, is this kindness? Am I teaching them kindness? Am I questioning kindness? So I kind of went through and thought about everything kindness has been and is in my life and where I am today. And especially as somebody who publishes stories of people who are stepping up, sometimes a little afraid and saying, hey, this is my story, but I know it's going to help other people. That's kindness. And that was something I talked about too, was how my authors are stepping up and saying, this is bigger than me and I want to share it. So that was kind of my chapter in a nutshell.
Nice.
That's very nice.
Nice. Yes. And paperback just went out today, I believe, right? That's what I saw. And today's Tuesday, so by the time this goes out, it went up 2 days ago. Yes. And so that's exciting. That's awesome. Mm-hmm. So I'm sorry, Brian, were you going to say something?
No.
Okay. So Cori, leave us with your best piece of writing advice.
Okay.
It's heavy. I know. It's almost like Brian's question to pick us off, right? I really tied that up.
Yeah. I always like to tell people you have permission to write a messy first draft. Just sit down and start writing something. Get some ideas out. It doesn't have to be perfect. And I think that's something that holds a lot of people back is we have this fantasy of like sitting down at our computers and just, being sweaty and the storming outside, and you're just writing away into the night, and you wake up with a manuscript, and that's not how it is. It's a process like anything else, and it takes learning. It takes discovering that you can open up and let the words out and not be afraid of, rejection and failure and all those other things. And a lot of people who are business owners, even if they're high up in their, in their leadership, if they're at the head of their business and they've got all these people working under them, there's still that fear when they go to share their story. So just do something, write something, believe in yourself, and don't worry about writing perfectly.
I like that. I think that's a perfect way to end this. But before we do, Cori, can you let everybody know where they can learn more about you, how they can work with you? Just tell us everything.
Yeah. So I'm at coriwamsley.com. If anyone's interested in any of my authors, my book page is there with all of their books. Living Kindly is on there too. So you can reach out to me there. I am on Facebook as Cori Wamsley. I have a Facebook group that's Elevate Your Leadership with a Book, and it's a free group. Anyone's welcome to join it. I'm also on LinkedIn and Instagram and probably everywhere else, YouTube.
Yeah. Cori's got some great videos, actually, and I'd like to share one piece of advice that really I loved, and I shared that with you. But when do you know you're done writing a book? And that was my favorite, right? When you're finished telling the story. I was like, wow, that's profound. That is so profound. So,
hey man, didn't you ever guys see The Never Ending Story? Come on.
It's surprising. I get that question so much. How do I know if I'm done? And it's again that did I give enough? Do you feel like you've given enough? If you do, then you're done. That's it.
Thank you again, Cori. We appreciate your time.
Sure. Thank you for having me on.